Actelis, we make systems that bring broadband to more subscribers over greater distance, so more bandwidth and to more customers, and we do that over copper. We do that with several technologies, SHDSL and also VDSL and ADSL variants. And one of the greatest assets, because it's already paid for, is copper. And a few years ago, a lot of operators were thinking that copper was becoming kind of a legacy asset. It's something they'd move away from. But that's actually not true today. And the reason is that any access media is only as good as the electronics on the end. So fiber, is a tremendous technology, but it's also a very costly technology. And it was originally deployed very widely in those areas where you had either extremely large customers or in dense, urban areas where you could aggregate a lot of customer traffic and afford that cost. What's really changing today for the operators is that the source of broadband traffic is changing. You've got residential customers are literally using 15, 20 meg, having multiple streams of video, doing online gaming, all sorts of different things that were never conceived of when the POTS network was built. You've got small and medium enterprise customers who used to use very little bandwidth are now using the network as a key strategic asset, both to outsource their own IT operations and be much more efficient, and to find new ways to communicate with their customers in a very multimedia-rich environment. So the challenge is now the network that we have today was built to solve a very different problem, which is how do you take a lot of bandwidth to a very few sources? Today, the operator has to take a lot of bandwidth to a great many places. How do you do that cost effectively? Well, because of advances in technology, copper is now able to provide the kind of KPIs, the kind of bandwidth and performance, not that are needed for absolutely every application in the network, but which are needed for many network applications, and particularly for the small medium enterprise, where today a lot of them are starting to buy 10 meg services, Ethernet services, for residential customers. And even looking forward into the future, we can provide hundreds of meg bandwidth and do that to greatly increase the operator's footprint at a much more reasonable cost than they can do either with fiber or with microwave. Yes, fiber is not dead. Fiber is a great technology, but any operator that wants to maximize their business case is going to have to use a complementary mix of fiber and copper and microwave, and use each technology where it's cost optimized for the actual application that's required and the scalability requirements. Certainly video is not being constrained primarily just to the residential market anymore. You're seeing multimedia-rich interaction between customers, a lot of applications that are being run between business partners. The tremendous amount of very multimedia-rich traffic is being generated everywhere. And that's doing a number of things. For one, it's making some of the traffic requirements much more symmetrical than they have been in the past. So it's not just an issue of building a network where you can have a great deal of downloads, right, and a little bit of upload request traffic, saying, this is what I would like to download next. Now you're having a lot of interactive communication. And so having a rich toolkit of technologies that include some symmetrical and asymmetrical options, is really important. Operators are trying to figure out what's the most efficient way to go and find their new revenue opportunities and convert on them. For instance, we were just talking to a customer a week or two ago who they're transitioning from their former approach, which is to go out and have sales prospect all the different customers that are out there, try to find who has the interest, and then figure out where and how they can build the network. They're transitioning to targeting those buildings where they think that they have the most opportunity, proactively building bandwidth there, and then going out and very aggressively selling. And they also see a lot of the market opportunity coming from that small and medium enterprise, which is discovering how incredibly important the network is to increasing the efficiency of their operations, but has not been buying before, right? So to do that, they're going out and they're mapping their metros They're figuring out where the best market opportunity is. They're identifying the buildings, and then they want to run Ethernet first mile over copper into those buildings and oversubscribe that bandwidth. And then they can turn their salespeople loose, and instead of saying, buy from us and we'll provision over a period of X months, or in the case of fiber, it might be a year, they can say, we've got bandwidth there tomorrow. Would you like to buy? Here's the kind of performance we can offer. Here are the bandwidth options we can offer. And increasingly, I think you'll see here are the kind of SLAs that we can offer. And so we actively participate with our customers in helping them understand and define those business opportunities and the kind of business case that they can make possible, and also sharing expertise about the kinds of approaches, right, that are being done by other operators worldwide. You know, the concept of sweating an asset had everything to do with the assumption that those assets were something that did not have long-term value. And I think the concept of sweating the asset of copper is dead, because frankly, any access media is only as good as the electronics on the end. And the advances that we have made in dynamic crosstalk cancellation technologies have so very much made the ability to overcome crosstalk issues with copper a fact that copper is no longer a legacy asset. Copper is going to be not only in the network and paid for, but actively used for broadband far into the future. And it's not a case anymore of how long am I going to use my fiber or use my copper before I transition to fiber. It's where in the network can I use copper permanently, and where can I justify the high cost of fiber given the customer density and the size of the customer. If you look at what they were actually stating, they were saying that the sales of ONTs, right, the CO units, right, were down. Well, yes, they're down because times are tough economically, and because a lot of operators were going out and they're replacing these devices in the COs. But what they're doing is they're filling in and they're selling into those boxes. They're adding the CPE component, right, to those boxes, and that's what they're selling today. So of course, when you build, a common asset, at some point you want to convert on that, turn that into revenue, and the focus goes from having built the core asset to going out to the individual customers and making the investment there and actually closing the sales. That's where the shift goes. And as you'll notice in that article, they conveniently left out any reference whatsoever to what was happening with the sales of those OLTs.